Hey everybody, welcome to another video in my Intro to HTML series. In this video, we're going to talk about lists. There are two types of lists that we're going to use. We're going to use ordered lists and unordered lists. Lists are found everywhere in the internet. We use them to organize things like maybe your top 10 favorite bands of the 20th century. Maybe it is going to be the top 25 basketball teams in the NCAA. Maybe it's going to be an outline that is going to be the structure of a paper. There are lists everywhere. Those are what I would call ordered lists. Those are ordered lists because they have a specific order to them. A top 25 would be a numerically ordered list. An outline would be organized with main points and sub points and sub points, and those would be ordered usually with an ordered list. Other types of things that might be ordered in a list would be things like a recipe or a list of items that don't need to be in any particular order. Recipes are great examples for that. I'm going to show you how to use basic unordered list first, and then I'm going to show you how to make ordered lists, and then I'm going to talk about nesting lists inside of lists. Let's get started. To get started, I have a basic web page. Looks like this. I've got a header with an H1 in it. I've got nav with links. I've got 3 articles, each article having an H2 and some paragraphs, and then I've got my footer. The HTML looks like this. Header with H1, nav with a bunch of links, article with an H2 and 2 paragraphs, article with an H2 and 3 paragraphs, article with an H2 and 3 more paragraphs, noticing the article closes each time that it opens, a footer with a paragraph and some small text. This is the basic structure from a previous unit. You can just reuse some of your files and name them as a different name. Use it as a template, essentially. In the first article, I'm going to add a list. You'll notice that my H2 says lists, so I'm going to add a list in here. Unordered lists, these are the ones that will just be a bulleted list. They're not going to be numbered or lettered. They start like this, UL, close UL. UL is the root element for an unordered list. It tells the browser that an unordered list will begin and end. You'd put your content inside of that UL. All the things that you want to have in your list, you'd put those in between the opening and closing UL. Those items in the list have to be contained in LI or list item elements. Item 1. I'm going to copy and paste it. Item 2. Item 3. I might do something like this. Ingredients for bread. Maybe I'll do salt, flour, eggs, water. All right. Save it. Check it in the browser. And there you see my list. Ingredients for bread is my H3. Salt, flour, eggs, water. Excellent. Now let's say that I wanted to give a step-by-step set of instructions. That step-by-step set of instructions would also be a list, but those instructions are an algorithm. Each step has to be done in a particular order. So what I might do is use an ordered list for that. steps for making bread. And since it's an ordered list, I would use OL. OL is the root element for an ordered list, okay? UL is my unordered list, OL is my ordered list. OLs would also have LIs nested inside of them. The first LI will have the bullet number 1. So what I might say is mix flour and salt and yeast. Oh, I forgot to put yeast in this one. In a large bowl. Two, add eggs. 3, add water. 4, mix, oops, that's not an element, Li, mix. Now, I'm going to tell you I'm not an expert at making bread. I have no idea how to do it off the top of my head. I just thought it would be something interesting for lists. So if you are a bread maker out there, I apologize. I'm not meaning to make your art seem less important. I just don't know what I'm doing with making bread. Let's just look at how the list looks. And there we go. We've got my unordered list up here, which tells me what items I need for my recipe. And then my ordered list down here, step 1, step 2, 3, 4. That's an ordered list. It gives us numbered bullets instead of the other bullets up there. Okay? So that's the basics of an ordered and unordered list. Now, what if you wanted to make something like an outline? Sometimes you might want to have sub-items to a list. Maybe I wanted to have step 1, A, B, and C. Step 2, A, B, and C. Step 3, A, B, and C. Step 4, A, B, and C. Well, that gets a little bit trickier. There are 2 things we have to do with that. First thing, we have to build our HTML structure. Second thing is we have to style it, and we'll get into styling it in another video. But let's build that HTML structure for a nested list. The way nested lists work is you've got an opening, closing root element. So in this case, opening, closing, OL. Then we've got a bunch of list items. The list items, or LIs, define the bullets. And they define the level on which those bullets are going to appear. So the OLs define the list itself, where the list begins and ends. So I've got this list which begins here, it ends down here after all these items are added. Well, what if I wanted to have a sublist to this? A sublist would be a list that's fully contained inside of another list. So this opening, closing OL here, I would need another list that's fully enclosed in here. Let's say I wanted to have a list show up underneath my first item. What I would do is go underneath my first item and open and close another list. OL opens, OL closes. So I'm completely opening and closing another list fully inside of this other list. It's not inside of the list item, it's underneath the list item. Now I'll put some list items inside the nested list. I want 3 list items in here. Actually, you get warm water and mix the yeast into it. You mix the salt and flour into another bowl. and then you start adding the dry ingredients into the wet. So I've got this sub list here, which is going to be underneath this list item. It's fully enclosed inside of this other list. I'm going to save this. I'm going to refresh it in the browser. And what you see here is pardon me. You've got the outer list here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and you've got another list starting and ending fully inside. And you'll notice that the numbers start at the beginning. So 1, sub-item 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 4. This is a nested list. When you nest lists inside of lists, the browser is automatically going to tab that nested list over by 1. If I wanted to have this nested 3 items deep, in other words, I've got an outer list, an inner list, and then an inner list inside of the inner list, I would want to have an OL opening and closing fully inside of the other nested list. I really don't know how to make bread. So save it, check it in the browser, and there you see, item 1 appears under item 1. Okay, so I've got list outer, nested list, and a list nested inside of the nested list. Here are some of the things that go wrong for students. Now, I've talked about this in the past. I've said anytime I add an opening tag, I immediately add the closing tag. Where people screw up when they're learning how to do this is when they're nesting lists, they add the opening tag and they forget to do the closing tag immediately, and then they start adding list items and then never close one of those nested lists. What's going to happen is your list structure is going to get totally messed up if you do that. And when you have a really complex structure like this, lists nested inside of lists, it can be really hard to find where you're missing opening and closing tags. So here are some things that are going to help you be successful when doing nested lists and HTML. 1, complete your outermost list first. Okay, I got my outermost list completed. Next, add your inner nested list under the item that you want that list to show up under. So I wanted this sub list here to show up under the first item, which was mixed flour and salt and yeast in a large bowl. I wanted this list to show up underneath that one. So I get my opening and closing OL, which you saw me do, put it underneath this list item, and then add all the required list items for that inner list. Once I got that done, I wanted to have another list inside of there, so I got my opening, closing right away, and then I added list items to it. That's one thing that's going to help you succeed. Another thing that's going to help you succeed is making sure that you have good tab structure. Remember, we use these tabs with nesting. Anytime you have an item nested inside of another item, for example, this LI is nested inside of this OL. Things that are nested in there get one tab over from the thing that they're nested in. So the OL is on this level. If I put an LI inside of that OL, I tab it over by 1. All right? I know this OL is nested inside of this OL, so it's tabbed over 1 from this OL. I know this LI is nested inside of this OL, so it's tabbed over 1 from this OL, tabbed over 2 from that OL. If you do these things, you'll probably be successful on your first time. If you don't have this kind of organization, you might have some real troubles. So make sure you follow those little steps, use the advice that I give you, and this should be pretty easy for you. So that's the basics of making ordered lists and unordered lists and nesting lists. In a future video, we're going to talk about styling these lists, figuring out how to change the bullets of the lists. Thanks for watching.